Hey everybody, Dano here again. Have you ever asked yourself the question, how do I do astrophotography? How can I get started in astrophotography? Am I able to take pictures of space from my front yard? Can I take pictures of galaxies from my backyard? A question I see asked over and over on astrophotography groups on Facebook is, I want to get started in astrophotography. What telescope do I need to get? Uh, you don't need a telescope to get started in astrophotography. You can get started with something as simple as a DSLR and a 50 millimeter lens. You don't need this big thing. This will do. Today, I'm going to share with you my journey and how I got started in astrophotography, starting with this simple little camera right here. You don't need a big giant telescope to get started in astrophotography. My journey started with this little Canon PowerShot. I'm going to go ahead and take this out. But really, a few years before I bought this, my friend Chad invited us out to his land one night, and he had his DSLR, and I never had one or seen one really. I always took pictures with my phone. And that was my first introduction to long exposure photography. So he just took some long exposure shots that night and he showed me some of the images. And I was like, wow, I didn't know cameras could do that. I had no clue. And that was my first introduction to these kinds of cameras. That was probably 2014, I think. And a few years passed by, and I was like, man, I should get a camera like that. So I got this Canon PowerShot SX710. It has a 30x optical zoom, and I bought this, I think, because this probably would have been the summer of 2017. The eclipse was coming up, and so I bought this, and I took some photos of the moon, and I saw detailed craters for the first time. I was like, oh, this is so cool. So we drove up to Illinois in August of 27 to take pictures of the eclipse, to see the eclipse. And this is all I had, was this Canon PowerShot. And I wish I had more. I wish I would have had a huge telescope and all the gear I have now, but I didn't. But there's another eclipse coming up in 2024, and hopefully I'll be more prepared for that one. I was able to get some great shots with this little camera. But after I saw the eclipse, I was blown away, and that's probably what that was the catalyst that threw me over the edge. And I was like, okay, I've got to get a DSLR. So my buddy Chad let me borrow his 7D, and I messed around with it. And I was reading up on Facebook groups and cloudy nights. I was almost going to get a Sony, and I decided, so he had let me borrow his 7D. I was familiar with everything on a Canon, so I decided to go with a Canon. I found this used 6D with a kit lens and a 50 millimeter lens on Facebook Marketplace. I bought it used. The girl, she had bought a new Sony camera and she was selling her Canon 6D, and I had done research enough to know that the 6D was a great camera for nightscape photography for Milky Way, and it's a full frame sensor. So I got this camera in September of 2017, and that's really when my astrophotography it took over my life. Basically, I became obsessed. I became obsessed with it. Putting this on auto and just snapping the shutter was easy enough. But with astrophotography, you have to actually learn some photography skills, some basic photography skills. So that was my next step. I really didn't know how to use this thing right here, this 6D. So what I did was I watched tons of YouTube videos on just basic manual photography, studying ISO, exposure, f-stop. Didn't know anything about that stuff. And then once I learned the basics, I got the basics, and then I set off on my journey to take pictures of the night sky for the first time. So I had the camera I wanted. I had the Canon 6D. I saw pictures posted on Milky Way Chasers group, and there were tons of awesome Milky Way shots with this camera. And so now I needed the lens. It came with a 24 to 105 kit lens, which I ended up using taking some of my first tracker shots with, but that's another story. So I basically researched and found the Rokinon 14 millimeter. Now, with a full size sensor, this is very wide. It's a huge landscape shot. The Milky Way is actually kind of tiny. But one thing you can do is turn your camera and put it in portrait mode instead of landscape mode, and that'll tighten it up a little bit, and you can get more foreground. So I got this lens. I think it was around $250 or something like that. So all in with the used camera and this lens, and then I don't even think I had an intervalometer at that point. I was in about 13, yeah, about $1,300. So I went out taking pictures of the night sky in the Mississippi Delta, where it's a lot darker than in town, and uh, did my first Milky Way shots in September of 27. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was learning, and it got eaten up by mosquitoes. It was terrible. I hate mosquitoes here in the summer. They're awful. But I put on a long sleeve shirt and I just went out there and fought them and took some shots. And I actually took my first deep sky object shot. I was just aiming across the field and I didn't even know what it was. And I captured Pleiades. I saw the cluster. I was like, whoa, that is cool. What is that? So I had to come home and look it up and found out what it was. And that is what led to, oh, well, I need a longer lens. I need to zoom in on that thing. A good way to find out if you will like this hobby, I would say you could get it can be an unmodified camera. So you can use it for daytime photography, nature, whatever. This wide angle lens like this Rokinon, it's an f2.8, so it lets in a lot of light really fast. With this 6D, I was able to take, I think the rule 500 is 30 seconds with this, but I always back off that number a little bit. I would do 20, 25 seconds without star trails. And I just kept reading, you know, Facebook groups and Googling information and learning. And I eventually saw where somebody was cranking their ISO up on this camera to 6400. And then I started trying that. We made a trip out to the desert in Utah, and I cranked my ISO up to 6400 and took some pictures of the Milky Way. I was blown away at the difference because I was normally using 1600 because the higher number ISO, the more noise you're usually going to generate. But this camera is, it's well known for its low light photography capabilities. So I think right now you can grab a used 6D for, I've seen them on eBay for like maybe $400 to $800, somewhere in that range. They'll probably have a high shutter count, but I think this one had a kind of fairly high shutter count when I bought it, and it still works great, still fine. So yeah, you don't need a big telescope to get into this stuff. Uh, a cheap. I bought this off of Life Pixel. I had it H alpha modified. Bought it used. It's a Canon T5i. I think it was like $700 when I bought it back then. This helps bring out more of the red hydrogen alpha and nebulosity in the sky. It pulls it out better because an unmodified camera has a filter in front that blocks that light out. But you can still get great photos with an unmodified camera. So, and little did I know that when I bought this 6D and the two lenses, it came with this nifty 50 lens. And this lens right here is probably the cheapest astrophotography lens you can get. I think brand new, they list for $125. And this thing is awesome for astrophotography. And you can use this, a full frame sensor and a tripod, which I have a little baby tripod right there. I recommend something bigger like I'm filming with, but I got that tripod for like $60 on Amazon. This is just for filming and stuff like that. But yeah. Oh, and an intervalometer. This was around $25 or so, and you can just plug this in and you don't have to use the 2-second delay built into the camera. When I first started out, I was using the 2-second delay and hit it and then just hopefully it wasn't still shaking when it started the exposure. Later on, I got this intervalometer, and this you can start the exposure without touching the camera, so you won't be shaking the ground. So yeah, I was able to do a test a couple years ago, I think. I wanted to see if I could get a picture of the Milky Way without a tracker. So I used this full frame 6D and this nifty 50, and I think I took 6-second or 8-second shots, and I took about, I don't know, maybe it was about 100 of them, and I stacked them in Sequator or Deep Sky Stacker or something, and I got a pretty decent image of the Milky Way, and that was untracked. So yeah, you don't need a giant telescope and you don't need an equatorial mount to get into this hobby. As a matter of fact, I would suggest this route because you may not like it. And I've seen people buy $5,000 worth of gear and they've never even picked up one of these cameras and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to use it. I think this is a great way to learn is with a wide angle lens and just start getting out and taking pictures of the sky. Yeah, you don't have to jump in, uh, you know, head first. Just dip your toe in the water. If you do get into this hobby, you'll learn that post processing, editing the images is it's really half the battle. Just like that GI Joe slogan, knowing is half the battle. Post processing is half the battle. Uh, I took this camera and this lens on vacations with me out to the desert, and I took Milky Way photos. The first time it was October, so it was past the core season. But I, for the longest time, and even when I got my tracker, I didn't stack. I didn't learn calibration frames. I didn't learn how to really edit. Uh, I just took single images. I downloaded Lightroom Mobile. I think it's free on your phone. And I just started messing with the sliders and I would just adjust it to make it look good. So for the longest time, I kind of fought processing. I didn't learn it. Um, I was able to get images I was happy with, just single images and just edit those in Lightroom Mobile. If you're wanting to get started in this, the cheapest way possible is to get a used DSLR, something like this Rokinon 14 millimeter lens. And you can even use this on a crop sensor, which is going to be a little cheaper than the 6D. I have used this lens with this camera. And you can't do long exposures like you can with a full frame, but I think I turned mine down to about 15 seconds and I'm able to get pretty good Milky Way shots. But I also stack those I used to just, when I first started out, I just took single photos, and they were pretty good, especially with the high ISO of 6400. But once I learned how to stack and take calibration frames, a crop sensor and this 14 millimeter is actually a good combo, and it's probably your cheapest combo. Uh, they have a they have a version 2 of this lens. I have the old one, and I think the newest one is it's about 400 bucks, maybe 500. I'm not sure, but it was on sale recently. But I didn't get one. I think the only difference is it's weather sealed, but this one's still holding up fine for me. And this is what I do all my wide field and landscape type stuff and Milky Way shots with. And yeah, this crop sensor, you could get a used stock Canon T5i probably for about 300 bucks or so on eBay or whatever. Cloudy Nights has gear for sale on there. You can sign up on there and find DSLRs for sale. If you're looking to get started in this hobby, this is a great way to do it. It's the cheapest way, because if you get a big giant telescope like I had up here earlier, you're going to need an equatorial mount for that thing, and that's where this hobby starts getting expensive, is when you get into longer focal lengths. This 50 millimeter lens on this full frame, uh, you can just use a tripod, and this 14 millimeter lens on a crop sensor, you can just use a tripod and get landscape shots. So yeah, it's a great way to learn basic photography settings. You'll have to turn your dial to manual to M, and you'll be setting the ISO, you'll be setting the aperture, and you'll be setting the exposure time. And that's how I learned basic photography skills, is taking pictures of the night sky. That eventually led to a tracker, which is, that's another video in itself. I'll get to those later. But so if you're asking yourself, how do I take pictures of the night sky? Or I wonder if I can take pictures of the night sky. Hey, I would like to take pictures of the night sky. Does NASA take all those pictures of the night sky? Can I take pictures of the night sky? Yes, you can. You can pick up a DSLR and a 14 millimeter lens, and you can just walk on outside and start snapping away. So yeah, that was my journey into how I got started in astrophotography. I think that's one of the best pathways. It's the cheapest. You can get a camera, get a lens, get a tripod, get an intervalometer, and that's really all you need to get started. If you're not familiar with editing, there's apps like Snapseed, Lightroom Mobile is free, I believe. That's what I use to edit my single photos. You get something like this, you get out there, you start taking pictures, you start learning how the camera works. Then you start editing photos and you see if you like it. It may not be for you. You may not like it, or you may love it. When I took my first picture of the Milky Way, I fell in love, and I became obsessed, and I wanted to learn everything about this. And I've been doing it since 2017, and next month is January 2023. So yeah, I'm coming up on 6 years. It's hard to believe. Yeah, so yeah, it's hard to believe that I've been doing this over 5 years now. But that's the thing, you don't want to rush it. You want to get into it and learn it the right way, and just enjoy it. Find out if it's for you or not. You may not like it, because if you jump in and buy a huge telescope and an equatorial mount, and you have to lug that stuff outside, and you're like, man, I don't feel like doing that, you may not like it. But this is simple. It's easy. Just pick it up, walk outside, take some pictures. So yep, that's my journey and how I got started. And if you are looking to get started, I think it's a great way to learn the basics and go from there. All right, clear skies, everybody. Take it easy. you can pick up a DSLR and the little Rokinon 14 millimeter. So, alrighty then. I'm just gonna put this up. I'm done talking about this. Hey, you're gonna get kicked out of here. You're gonna get kicked out of here. Come on.